significant. One, because he is the member of the Supreme Council of the Islah Party, a Muslim Brotherhood party, which is the biggest opposition party in Yemen, and therefore he holds sway over the party. And also he's member of the Council of Yemen's Clerics, which is an independent entity of Yemen's clerics, very powerful here in Yemen, and they have huge influence over tribes and also over thousands of Yemenis across the country. So his presence is very symbolic, seeing Abdul-Majid al-Zindani talking to the anti-government protesters, telling them that with what you're doing right now is a source of inspiration for Yemenis. That's a clear message to President Ali Abdullah Saleh, that the man he was banking on for years and years to support him is now siding with his opponents.
And what about this development that President Saleh has now been blaming Israel and the US for the troubles? It's quite strange, isn't it, given that he was such an ally of the US over the last few years?
President Saleh is known for his tactics. The same day that Hosni Mubarak was toppled, he went to the parliament and he said, "This is it, I got the message and I'm offering you concessions. I'm not going to run in 2013, I will resign and my son will not inherit power." Then he offered a reform package. The opposition told him, "That's not enough. We want you, your relatives, to leave." Then he came back and he said, "I'm ready to release political prisoners and also to offer a national unity government." They said, "That's not enough, you have to go." Today, he's completely changing tactics. He's telling them, "You have to know that I'm standing firm, I'm standing my ground, I will fight till the final drop, and I have been elected by the Yemenis, and therefore only Yemenis, ballot box, can decide the future of Yemen." This is why he's using now this conspiracy theory about the Israelis and the Americans, and he knows that the Yemenis like conspiracy theory. This is a country where anti-American sentiment is on the rise. By using that, by telling people that the Americans are colluding to topple him, he is desperately looking for more support among people who are starting to abandon him.
OK, Hashim, thanks very much indeed. Hashim Halbara there live in Sana'a with the latest. Egypt has once again postponed the reopening of its stock market. There were protests outside the exchange on Monday after it announced that trading would start up again on Tuesday. But officials released another statement saying it would now remain closed until Sunday at least. It's been shut for more than a month due to the unrest that forced President Hosni Mubarak from power. We're getting reports that Omani troops have fired into the air to break up anti-government protests in the city of Sohar. It's the fourth day of protests there that saw at least one person killed on Saturday. There have been conflicting reports of up to 6 people killed. Sultan Qaboos bin Said, who's been in power for 4 decades, has promised more jobs and better unemployment benefits. Iranian opposition groups have planned demonstrations on Tuesday against the detention of their leaders, Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mehdi Karoubi. The two have been under house arrest for more than 2 weeks for illegally organising protests. It's now been reported that security forces have moved them to an unknown location. Still ahead on this half hour, Zimbabweans are urged to join a million-citizen march calling for President Mugabe to step down. But following recent arrests and torture, how many will risk it? And the mammoth task of counting more than 1 billion people in India. But will a census do justice to the homeless? Reminder for you of the top stories now on Al Jazeera. Residents of Nalut say that pro-Gaddafi paramilitary troops are just outside the city. They're reportedly hiding out in deserted army barracks and apparently equipped with anti-aircraft machine guns. There are reports of clashes between people fleeing Libya and border guards in Tunisia. Security forces have been overwhelmed by the number of people trying to cross at Ras Ajdiya. And a leading Yemeni cleric has joined protesters calling for President Ali Abdullah Saleh to step down. Saleh has blamed Israel and the United States for the unrest in his country and the Arab world. Now in Zimbabwe, anti-government protesters have called on people to join a million-citizen march, demanding that President Robert Mugabe step down. But few appear to have turned out. More than 40 opposition activists who met in Zimbabwe last week have been arrested and charged with treason in recent days. They were detained while attending a lecture on North African anti-government protests and have been accused of plotting an Egyptian-style uprising. The group has denied any wrongdoing. We can now cross live to Johannesburg and speak to Tiseke Kasambala, a senior researcher with Human Rights Watch. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. So, how likely is it that this march will actually go ahead?
Well, it's not clear at the moment what's going on in terms of the march, and it's also not clear who is actually behind the march and whether they would be able to galvanize enough Zimbabweans to go out on the streets, given the lack of internet access in quite a few parts of Zimbabwe. But what is clear is that Zimbabweans do have the right to peacefully protest, and that the government should respect that right.
So was there any kind of suggestion that this was perhaps an attempt to bring people out, to lure people out on the streets on false pretences, to in some ways put them in danger? That was one report that we saw.
Well, those are some of the reports that we've been hearing, and they are quite mixed reports. However, what I understand from having spoken to people on the ground is that there's currently a very heavy military and police presence in the capital city of Harare at the moment, which means that the government seems to be taking this call quite seriously.
And what about, I mean, the shops and so on? I mean, you've heard from people who are there. I mean, are people going to work as normal, or what are they doing?
Well, people seem to be going to work as normal, but we are quite concerned by some of the incidents we've heard. We've heard unconfirmed reports that the officers of one NGO crisis coalition were raided by police today, and it's not quite clear what's happening there. And as many reports have shown, this is what we believe a wider clampdown on peaceful protests and the right to peacefully criticize the government in Zimbabwe. And the government has shown a pattern of coming down very heavily, brutally suppressing such peaceful protests. So it's not clear what is happening. All we know is that there's a heavy military and police presence in the country.
And is there a main demand from these protests? I mean, what is the big gripe that would bring people out onto the streets if they do come out?
Well, in the past, we have seen peaceful protests in Zimbabwe against the government's economic policies, against the government's very poor human rights record. And it seems, if this is indeed true, Zimbabweans may be taking inspiration from the events that have been taking place in the Middle East and North Africa. But also there's a lot of anger around the arrest of those 45 activists who currently remain in prison and are now being charged with treason for just simply watching a DVD about the uprisings in the Middle East.
OK, Tiseke Kasambala from Human Rights Watch, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it. Now, in India, the latest population census is trying to put an accurate figure on the massive number of homeless people in the country. But as Prerna Suri reports, critics say that the survey has no chance of recording the real number of street people.
This is how India is trying to identify its homeless. Late into the night, government employees quiz this girl about what she does, who's in her family, and which god she believes in. Once they tick all the boxes, the information will then be used to assess her most pressing needs. It's an ambitious task, and it's happening as the country's census comes to a close. We've kept the homeless on the last day as we don't want to replicate data. They frequently move, so we wanted an accurate figure.